Hey folks, Dr. Mike Israel here for Renaissance Periodization, RP Plus, RPU, and the planet Venus. Yes, it's a loving planet with incredibly high temperatures. Whoever assumed that Venus had anything to do with love had clearly never been to Venus, but more importantly, they probably never thought about rest times between sets, which is our hypertrophy advanced concept and tool number 7. Let's get right into it. First topic is, why are we interested about rest times between sets? Then we're going to talk about the status of the direct evidence. What has actual research, laboratory research found out about rest times and what's best for growth? We're going to talk something theoretical, but very, very important, which is actually critically important in figuring out why we care about rest times and why we want them specific, which is what is the goal of hypertrophy training? So I think a lot of people lose sight of that when they think, whoa, you need to rest this much and that much. But rest enough time for what is the question we're going to answer. That answer is given to us by the 4-factor rest times model, developed here at RP. It's really good. And we're going to talk about examples of applying that model, implications for training, and programming recommendations. Actually, really straightforward stuff. This is, I'm super proud of this concept when we developed, and it just makes a lot of sense. And once you get through it, you'll be like, holy crap, this is awesome. And it really just solves a lot of problems with rest times. So first question, why ask between rest times, or ask about rest times between sets? So first is, if we found out rest times don't have to be nearly as long as we thought, most of the time you see people in the gym, they do a set and they wait around. You got better shit to do than wait around at a gym. Imagine if we found out that optimal hypertrophy occurred with 5 seconds rest between sets as opposed to 3 minutes. Holy crap, you could have tons of your life back. You just have saved tons of time, right? Next question is, if we want optimal gains, okay, forget efficiency, who cares? We just want the best gains possible. Well, gee, rest times, some rest time probably leads to optimal gains. We want to find out what that is. Point number 3, there's lots of confusion on the topic. A lot. So it has to be addressed. There's all sorts of people have all sorts of ideas about rest times that are unfortunately not super correct. And a lot of those folks are actually not interested in this sort of thing because too many people want one blanket answer. I get that all the time on Instagram when I post training videos. A lot of people say, how much do you rest between sets? The answer, as you will see, is relatively complicated for Instagram. Simple for intellectual life, complicated for Instagram. But a lot of people want that blanket answer, or just 2 minutes or 1 minute, and the blanket answers just almost never work in anything that's worth doing well. Right? You ask somebody how you build a rocket. Okay, it's not going to be a blanket answer. It really depends on where you're going and what you want out of the rocket, weight limits, so on and so forth. So, status of the direct evidence. So when we look at laboratory evidence on rest times, most analyses find no real difference in growth, but these are between what we can call not extreme alterations in rest time. 1 and 3 minutes, 2 and 4 minutes, not 5 seconds versus 5 minutes, okay? However, there's a distinct feature in the literature that very short rests have been found to cause less growth, specifically in compound moves, not an isolation move. So they found that moves like squats, deadlifts, bench presses, etc., if you rest very little, is less growth caused by a total number of sets. But in maybe things like tricep kickbacks and bicep curls, there's no real difference. Okay, and people have tested out to 3 to 5 minutes of rest and found that for most people, rest that long are not any more beneficial. Okay. So far, we can say that rest time doesn't matter a ton within a normal range, but it does matter if it gets a little too short. But if it gets really, really long, it doesn't add anything to it. So why is there a discrepancy between compounds and isolations? That idea actually leads to the rest of our analysis here. So first is, what is the goal of hypertrophy training? Sounds like a stupid fucking question because the answer is to grow muscle, right? But hypertrophy training, the hope as we grow muscle, the goal is to stimulate the target muscle. The target muscle. Not your lungs, not your nervous system, not your perception of how hard it is. The target muscle, okay? So how do we stimulate the target muscle? From 2 lectures back, the best way to stimulate a target muscle is to take it close to failure, close to its limits, but take that muscle itself close to its limits, not be limited by any other factors, right? You want to be limited in your set by the local muscle's ability to do more reps. And if you're limited by anything else, you're probably leaving gains in the tank. Okay, so for example, if the reason you stopped doing squats in your set of 20, you stopped at 15 is because you ran out of breath, you just like start choked to death, you have to rack the bar, is that true that we're pushing the quads as far as they go? No, because you pushed your lungs as far as they go. Now, is that great for improving your lungs? Actually, yes. High rep squats are a great way to get into cardio shape, but that won't get you into the best hypertrophy shape you can be because it doesn't push the local muscles far enough, right? So how do we know? So basically the answer is we have to stimulate the muscle as much as we can or to a sufficient extent locally, the muscle itself, and not be limited by anything else. How do we know we're not limiting local performance by any other mechanisms? Well, we examine local recovery and 3 other sources of systemic recovery to make sure that we can check the boxes and say we've rested long enough so that the limiting factor for this muscle's upcoming performance is the muscle itself, and thus the next set is going to be as stimulative of hypertrophy as possible, right? Because our goal is that the target muscle is as stimulated as possible. It's the limiting factor and no other system. How many other systems are there? There are 4 of the systems. So the first thing we want recovered in the 4-factor rest times model is local recovery. We'll get to what that means in just a second, but basically the local muscle you're stimulating has to be recovered enough to put in another good set, right? It can't just be, just barely recovered to do 1 more rep. Okay, that's hardly a set. That's hardly much growth. Okay, so local muscle has to be locally recovered to at least get another good set. We'll define exactly what that means in a bit. Secondly, your nervous system has to be recovered so that it's giving enough oomph, enough drive, so that local muscular recovery is now the limiting factor again. Your cardiorespiratory system has to be recovered enough. Your lungs have to be recovered enough in order to push the muscle to its limits. An easy way to see this, and we'll get to this in examples in just a second, if you're doing really, really high rep squats and you're, you're like, I gotta rack the bar, I'm gonna throw up, right? That's limiting. Your set is limited by cardiorespiratory. You could have done more squats if you just had better lungs, right? But does that ever happen on wrist curls? Can you imagine you're doing wrist curls on a bench with a dumbbell and you're like, oh my God, no, my forearms are fine, but I just can't breathe. Like, holy shit, you need to go to the hospital right now. You're probably in the middle of a heart attack, right? The way you reach failure in wrist curls, you're just like, oh, my wrists hurt and I can't do another rep. And then you just drop it. And then you go, that was tough. Someone's like, hey, it doesn't look tough. Well, your cardiovascular or cardiorespiratory system is not limiting that, which is a really good thing, right? So when you do wrist curl, you can be sure you're limited to a local factor, not by your cardiorespiratory system. Point number 4 is a synergist muscle recovery. And we'll talk about this in just a bit, but basically muscles that support the muscle you're trying to target, are they recovered enough to not be the limiting factor? For example, again, in squats, if you're targeting your quads and you start rounding your lower back because your lower back is so pumped and so sore and so tired that you can't maintain good technique, you end up racking the bar and someone's like, oh man, your quads gave out? And you're like, no, my lower back gave out. Is that really pushing your quads as hard as possible? No. So before we do our next set, we have to make sure our synergist muscles, the ones that support the main muscle we're targeting, are recovered enough to no longer be the limiting factor. All right. The 4-factor rest times model opened up, everything explained. So local recovery is asking the question, is the muscle itself ready to do at least another hard set, which by all the other definitions that we've put out is at least 5 good repetitions, potentially close to failure. Okay, and these are the most effective reps, right? Because they recruit all the higher-end motor units, so on and so forth. Is the muscle itself ready to do at least another 5 or so reps? Okay. If it's still full of lactic acid and then you can only do 1 more rep, the answer is no. So for example, if you did barbell curls and you put the bar down, and let's say you're a super endurance athlete and you're neurologically super primed and there's really no, your forearms and stuff are super strong, your biceps are pretty weak, so everything's fine except your biceps are messed up and they still have a ton of lactic acid in them. You're like, my bicep. Do you immediately reach down and do another set? No, because you do like 1.5 reps and you'll have to put it down. That's not a set. That's a joke. So how long do you have to rest? In that, if only your local recovery is the limiting factor, you have to at least rest at least enough seconds to let the biceps get another set of 5 reps, okay? Which might be like, 10 seconds, it might be 20, it might be 30, shit, it might be a minute. But you be able to be like, okay, all right, my biceps got another 5 reps in them. But if you still physically have lactic acid perceptual in your muscles, you're like, I can't even stretch these out. You're not getting 5 reps, no good, okay? So the first thing you have to make sure that you're checked off the list is the local muscle is recovered enough to do another good at least 5 reps. And it can be more than 5 reps, but at least 5 reps in that next set. Okay, that's the soonest you can possibly start. Number 2, nervous system recovery. The way you can tell is, this is a pretty rough metric, but it works pretty well. Do you feel like you have another hard set in you? Or do you just feel beat down and downtrodden from the last one? For example, let's say you're doing overhead barbell presses, right? And you just do a set of barbell presses, and then your lungs aren't super taxed. It's sets of 6 or something. You're breathing fine. No synergist muscles are a problem. Your front delts are the target, and they're no longer carrying lactic acid after 30 seconds. You look at the bar and you just feel weak. The idea of having to overhead press that, you're like, there's no way that's happening, right? Your nervous system is still not refreshed enough, not recovered enough to get another good effort. But you all know the feeling, if you've trained more than a couple months, of looking at that bar after about 2 or 3 minutes and being like, yeah, that shit's going up. Let's do it, right? When you feel ready to push your muscle to its limits, you're good to go. If you feel like you can't push hard yet or pull hard yet because you're just centrally, at your core, in your soul, still tired, still defeated, because every set should defeat you at least somewhat, it's not good to go yet. Don't go, right? Super, super straightforward. Next, is cardiorespiratory recovery occurred? Are you still breathing heavy, or is your breathing under control? Is the easiest way to do that one, right? So if you're ready to do another set of squats, so to speak, let's say your quads, no more lactic acid in them, your nervous system feels fine. You're like, all right, I can have a bar on my back. I can do some reps, but you're still doing this. How many reps of squats are you going to get? 3. And then you're going to throw up all over yourself, right? And even if you don't, you might get 10 reps of squats. Well, if your lungs were truly recovered and your cardiorespiratory system was performing at maximum ability, then you might have gotten 15 total reps and actually driven your quads close to failure. But if you're so cardiorespiratorily under-recovered, any set you do after that is just going to be, the limiting factor is going to be cardiorespiratory, which means you're just doing shitty cardio training at this point. Okay? So when your breathing is back to relatively normal, good to go. There's a chance that your breathing can be still pretty high, but that you have enough oomph to really contract the muscle in really small muscle mass exercises. So if you're breathing a little bit heavier on curls, can you do another set? Well, are your lungs going to limit you, or are you still going to push your muscles to the max? Well, if you're really close to local recovery and your nervous system feels good, another 5 reps of curls might just get you breathing a little bit heavier, but you're still failing at the muscle itself because of the muscle, not your cardiorespiratory system. That's totally fine. So with a cable curl drop set, you can be breathing pretty heavy at the end. It's just that your breathing can't be the limiting factor. For example, if your biceps don't have a ton of lactate in them, but you have to stop in the middle of a set of curls to go, okay, more, that's a problem, because now you're relaxing the muscles. You're not letting them accumulate the internal metabolites they need and generate the tension they need to get close to failure. You're letting your lungs take a breather. Not a really good thing. Last one, number 4, synergist muscle recovery. Is any supporting muscle still holding on to too much lactic acid, or is it too fatigued? And will it be the limiting factor on the next set instead of the target muscle? That can absolutely happen, right? If you're doing, pec flies or something like that, and it happens to be a slippery handle for your pec deck machine, your forearms might get pumped, right? Your pecs might be ready to go, but you're like, ooh, hold up. My forearms are still tired, right? If your forearms are super tired, they can be the reason that you start to bend like this towards the end, and you start to let the implement go, and you're done. And someone said, how many reps did you get in the tank for your pecs? You're like, my pecs could have done at least another 8 reps. So what the hell are you doing? That's not even 8 reps in reserve for your pecs. 8 RIR doesn't grow hardly any muscle compared to 2 or 3 or 4 RIR, right? So you have to make sure that whatever muscles are synergists, and sometimes they don't exist. If you're doing calf raises, there are no synergists, right? Your abs or something, right? Sometimes there are no synergists. For if you're doing forearms, like if you're doing wrist curls on a bench, there are no synergists. It's just your forearm muscles. But for biceps, there are already synergists, right? You guys ever do curls and your biceps are really recovered, but your forearms are still have a super ton of lactate in them? Don't do another set of curls yet, because your forearms are going to become the limiting factor. It's going to rip your biceps off. Not a good thing. All right. So some quick examples with sample times. Barbell squats for sets of 10 to 15 reps each time. After about 30 seconds, and as I say this, you'll probably be like, you know what, that's pretty close. After 30 seconds or so, your quads no longer have a lot of lactate in them, and they actually feel like they're pretty ready to go, right? Mentally, you might be ready after about 2 minutes. You're like, oh, I'm good for another set. But your lower back might take another 3 minutes. The synergist might take another 3 minutes to recover. It's like, you're ready to go, but you've been gaining some weight. Your lower back's like, nope, we're not starting yet. I still have lactic acid buildup. And because you're gaining weight and so on and so forth, your body fat might be higher, doing less cardio, your lungs might only be ready after 4 minutes. So it takes you 4 whole minutes to, okay, breathing's good. I've been ready for everything else. I'm good to go, right? So then, what is the answer to how much you rest between sets? 4 minutes. Or rather, when you can check all of those things that just checklisted at different times. What about something like machine rows, right? Your back muscles might be ready to go 10 seconds after. You guys finish a set of machine rows, you get some like pump in your back and it hurts. But then like, how long do you have an upper back lactate accumulation for? Like a couple seconds? After about 10 seconds, you're like, your back is feeling fundamentally fine, right? Your grip might take another 10 seconds after. It might take 20 seconds to go because it can be a limiting factor. Absolutely. Because it's machine rows, your lungs may never have been taxed because you're not propping yourself up. You're on a machine. It's propping you up. You might actually be totally good to go at that point, right? So lungs are automatic checklists right away. And mentally, you might feel ready in about 30 seconds. Right? Their machine rows are not the end of the world. And, after about 30 seconds, you're like, all right, yeah, I'm good to go. Let's go. You feel like you can get a mind-muscle connection again. You feel like you can get good nervous impulse to the muscles. Everything's good. So then you only rest for 30 seconds. And every single set you do, you rest for just enough time, roughly around 30 seconds. You're going to feel like all of those are good, hard sets with a local back musculature is what is limiting you. That took you only 30 seconds between sets to achieve in machine rows. It could have taken you 4 minutes to achieve in back squats. Very, very different. Now, I'm sure you guys see the, not stupidity, the ridiculousness of asking, hey, how much should I rest between sets? It really depends. And watch how it depends on this last example. Calf machine drop set. Your calves might be ready after 3 seconds of waiting. Ready for what, you ask? To do another productive set of 5 to 10 reps of a lower weight. So you do 200 pounds on the calf raise, and then you drop the weight, and you go to 180 or 160. You literally go 1, 2, 3. Lactate is almost completely gone from your calves, and you're definitely golden for another 5 to 10 reps, especially if you started the drop set at a set of 20, right? You're for sure good for another 5 to 10 reps. What about your lungs? They were never taxed. Who the hell breathes heavy on calf raises? If you breathe heavy on calf raises, you have serious issues. You need to go see your medical professional. Nervous system was never really taxed. I mean, for the love of God, how centrally difficult are calf raises? Can you imagine someone be like, oh, just did calves, man, I'm wiped out. I'm going to go to sleep. Like, what? Right? Like, you can pump out calves, no problem. It's really just the local limiting factor that's the problem. And what are the synergists on calf raises? None. Usually in a machine that just isolates your hips down to your calves, you're good to go. It's not like you're holding yourself into the machine. There's pretty much no synergist. So what is the rest time there between drop sets of calves? 3 seconds. 3 fucking seconds between sets. Someone could say, oh my God, you're resting way too little. And here's the kicker. You post on your Instagram, 3 seconds rest between sets. Here are my results. Here are my reps. Someone could say, oh my God, 3 seconds, you're an idiot. Why didn't you rest longer? And you could entertain the idea. What would happen if I rested longer? Well, I did another productive set of 5 to 10 reps after 3 seconds. So that's a big check. I could do another set if I rested, let's say 10 seconds. I could do another set of 10 to 15 reps. So let me ask you a question. Does a set close to failure of 5 to 10 grow less muscle than one of 10 to 15? Nope. Same amount of growth, because number of hard sets is the number one correlate for hypertrophy. Okay. What about if you rested 10 seconds? How would that affect your lungs? Well, it wouldn't. Your lungs never got taxed. What about your nervous system? Never taxed, or rather, never limiting factor. Never limiting factor for your nervous system, never limiting factor for your lungs, and there are no synergists. So your retort back to that person who says, why not you rest 10 seconds is, why would I? Imagine someone said, hey, listen, when you rest, when you take road trips, you need to spend at least an hour at every rest area. What if you have coffee in hand, you're feeling fucking golden, you've peed, you've pooped, you've grabbed a snack, you walk around and stretched. After 20 minutes, you're just like, biding time. And someone's like, no, you have to rest another 40 minutes. Maybe they have a great idea, but you have to ask why. You say, why? Well, did you use the bathroom? Yep. Did you grab a coffee? Yes. Do you feel great? Yep. Did you stretch your legs? Sure did. If all of the stuff we need to rest is accomplished, why would we rest longer? Now, we can if we want. You're stressed out about your day. You want to scroll Instagram for longer. Sure. But you don't need to rest any longer. Resting shorter Terrible idea, because then you won't achieve all of these and you will be limited by, from having your best hard sets. But any longer is totally up to you, and it's not necessary. So what does this imply for training? Well, how long do you rest between sets? The answer is when all 4 factors are removed. Okay? And when only factor 1 is limiting, local muscle is limiting, and it doesn't prevent 5 or fewer reps from being done, right? So basically, you approach a set and you know that what's going to stop you on this next set is your local muscular fatigue, and you're going to get at least 5 reps. You're recovered as you need to be to get full hypertrophic benefit. Okay? This can be very different between different muscles and different people. Your forearms. The way I train forearms is I rest no longer than 10 seconds between every single set. I never have. I almost certainly never will. There's nothing to rest for. After 10 seconds of doing some kind of forearms, I'm like, ooh. After 15, I'm like, man, it's just 5 seconds down the drain, right? I rest a minute, and it would increase the number of reps I got per set, but it's still the same number of hard sets. And we know that increasing reps doesn't really matter. It's the number of hard reps per set that really matter, right? So forearms, 10 seconds or something like that. What about quads? Can you imagine resting 10 seconds between sets of quad work, sets of high bar squats, 10 seconds? 10 seconds for most people on a set of 10 to 15 in squats is just enough for them to peel themselves out of the power rack and fall down on the floor in bloody vomit. But it's going to take another 3 minutes for you to clean up your blood and your vomit, put your belt back on, not die, get under the bar, walk out, reconsider your entire life plan, and do some more squats. I've actually tried drop sets of squats. It's the stupidest thing in the world, because 2 drop sets in, you're getting like sets of 2 with like 225 or something pathetic, and you are entirely limited by your lungs, and you can't even feel your quads because you're choking death. Real dumb, right? Huge difference between something like forearms and quads. What about someone whose aerobic differences mean cardiorespiratory recovery is really, really different? 300-pound person out of shape. After squats, it's going to take 10 minutes until their lungs are back in working order and not limiting factor anymore. What about a 100-pound in-shape person? I used to train cross-country runners that were elite national level when I was a university strength coach. Baffling. We'd have to do a set of 10, close to failure in the high bar squat. They're quick learners, really good technique all the way down. Had an elite endurance runner do a set of 10, and the last 5 reps were the slowest reps you've ever seen in your life. Full grinders. It was like, oh, just going up super, super slow. Rack the bar, and he goes like this. That was really hard. And I was like, are you going to throw up? Are you going to die? And they're like, what? It's like, okay, well, we'll rest another 2 minutes. And then they just literally just bumbled around for 2 minutes. And then we took the rest down to 1 minute, and they got the same number of reps. We took the rest down to 30 seconds, they got the same number of reps. Turns out if we let that guy rest for about 10 seconds, he would be good to just keep doing squats over and over and over. So a huge discovery you might make if you're a personal trainer is that your 100-pound housewife that's in reasonably good shape might need 15 to 30 seconds between almost every lift. And that your new guy who weighs 320 pounds and is really out of shape might need a long time between reps or between sets, and there's no like one template. Like if it's 2 minutes for everyone, both people are getting screwed in their own special way. Someone's not resting long enough, someone's resting too long, right? And just at a mechanistic level, if you're training biceps with curls, right, then there's only so much systemic problem you're going to generate. There's only so much nervous system fatigue you can generate just training one muscle. But what if you train your biceps, lats, rhomboids, erectors, glutes, and traps with barbell rows? The amount of systemic nervous system fatigue, central fatigue, is going to be pretty fucking high. You do a set of barbell curls, you put it down, you're like, a minute later, you're like, let's do it again. A set of barbell rows, after a minute, you're like, get that bar the hell away from me. I will collapse if I grab that thing. You might need another 1 or 2 minutes to get your shit together neurologically, right? So rest times can technically vary between 1 second between sets. If you're doing drop sets, sometimes just 1 second, enough to change the pin, is good to get another 5 to 10 reps of a lighter weight, or as much as 10 minutes between something like, imagine you were a pro bodybuilder and you're doing sets of 10 with 585, that's 6 plates in the squat. You don't think that's a minute rest, do you? It's not a minute rest. I've seen powerlifters doing high volume training rest 10, 15 minutes between high rep sets. Why? Because at minute 8, they're still lying on the floor. Their lower back doesn't work. You don't simply just bounce back from something like that. The real answer is rest as long as you need to checklist all 4 items, right? That being said, most rest times will be between 30 seconds and 2 minutes in hypertrophy training, but again, most doesn't describe a whole lot. On the shorter ends of rest, reps will fall with each set, right? But if the reps are over 5%, that probably means roughly the same hypertrophy, and you're good to go. People are always concerned about rep fall off. Like, well, you started in sets of 15 and now you're doing sets of 11. Why? Because you get tired. Like, but isn't that bad? No, unless your goal is to arbitrarily hit sets of 15. Then you should be training, resting 10 minutes between every set and just pissing away your entire life at the gym for literally nothing other than being able to tell people you've done a bunch of sets of 15, right? No added hypertrophy benefit there. And that's very, very clear. So how do you put this into programming? Best way is to auto-regulate rest times as the basis of every program. I don't ever have a stopwatch for my rest. Okay. What I do is I show up, I do a set, I think of all 4 checklists in my head, and when I can meet all 4, I do another set, right? Sometimes when I feel extra shitty, I take a little bit more time, right? What this does is it allows for local MRV detection, because if you rest just long enough for your local muscle to be the limiting factor, week after week after week, you can gauge performance of the local musculature super well. And when you no longer perform, you know you've hit a local MRV, right? Really, really cool. However, if you reach into something like it takes you double the time to recover centrally, especially from a nervous system perspective, right? Then, and you have to do that to keep the reps from falling. So for example, last week you rested a minute, you got sets of 10 on average. This week you're like, there's no way I'm getting sets of 10 if I rest a minute. I need a minute 30. I need 2 minutes because I'm just like, my soul is drained. That probably means you're close to over your systemic MRV. That means your whole system, your nervous system is probably a little bit overtrained, can't adequately recover you to perform. And it probably means you need a deload or a light session or something like that to back off, reduce systemic fatigue, and keep going productively, right? Can you time your rests for consistency? Sure. Just make sure you're not resting too little. Resting too long is okay because there's no limiting factors. Each set is still productively hard. You might just not be as efficient. Resting too little literally chops right into productivity. If you say you're going to rest only 30 seconds between bicep curls, but your forearms are the limiting factor after sets 2, 3, 4, and 5, you're not really training your biceps hard anymore. You're training your forearms hard. You're doing bicep curls using the wrong exercise, and you're going to be disappointed with your results. I would stay away from timing rests, but if you're gonna, give yourself a little bit of extra time and stay consistent like that. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Next time we meet up, we're going to be chatting about estimating the volume landmarks in your training. I'll see you then.